So let's talk about economics. And I know, when you hear that word, your mind probably jumps to, confusing charts and dense financial news. But I want you to just forget all that for a second. Because at its heart, economics is really the hidden science behind every single choice you make, from your morning coffee to your biggest life decisions. Let's dig in.
See, it always starts with a choice. Let's just say you've saved up a little bit of cash. What do? Do you finally pull the trigger on that new phone you've been wanting, or do you book that vacation you've been dreaming about? The thing is, you probably can't have both. And that dilemma, right there, is where all of economics begins.
Now here's what's so wild. Your personal choice, it scales way up. A government wrestling with a multi-billion-dollar budget is facing the exact same kind of trade-off. Do we build a shiny new power plant to make more energy, or do we invest that money in upgrading the grid we already have to make it more efficient? It's the same fundamental problem, just with a whole lot more zeros on the end.
Okay, so that leads us to the big why. Why are they always forced to choose in the first place? Well, the answer is the single most important concept in all of economics. It's one word: scarcity.
Here's the basic conflict, right here. On one side, you've got us humans with our wants, which are, let's be honest, pretty much unlimited. We always want more, or better, or something different. But on the other side, the resources we need to make all that stuff, the land, the people, the money, are limited. There's only so much to go around. And this constant tug of war between our infinite desires and our finite reality, well, that's the engine that drives pretty much all economic activity.
Yeah, the economist Lionel Robbins just nailed it with what we call the scarcity definition. He said economics is the study of how we behave when our endless desires, what he called our ends, run smack into our limited resources, or scarce means. It's really the science of how we manage that fundamental mismatch.
So if scarcity is the problem, what do we do about it? Well, every society, from the tiniest village to the biggest country, has to deal with this. And they do it by making some really tough choices that, believe it or not, always come down to three big questions. First off, what are we going to make with the limited stuff we have? Are we producing more cars or more schools? Second, how are we going to make it? Are we going to use mostly people, or are we going to invest in fancy robots and automation? And third, and this is a big one, for whom are we making all this stuff? Who actually gets to enjoy the things our economy produces?
Now, to even begin to answer those huge questions, economists develop two different but totally connected ways of looking at the world. Think of them as two different lenses. They were first outlined by an economist named Ragnar Frisch way back in 1933, and they really help us break down all this complexity.
First, you've got microeconomics. This is like looking at the economy with a magnifying glass. It's focused on individual trees in the forest. It asks questions like, why did you choose the phone over the vacation? Or why does one specific coffee shop charge what it does? Then you've got macroeconomics, which is like looking at the economy from a helicopter. It's the whole forest. It deals with the big picture stuff, the entire nation's income, inflation, unemployment, and whether the economy as a whole is growing.
Okay, that's all great in theory, but let's get real. How do these big ideas actually play out in the real world? Let's zoom in on a field where these kinds of choices are everything: engineering.
And that brings us to something called engineering economics. It's basically a whole field that's all about applying these exact principles to technical projects. The goal is super straightforward but incredibly important. How do we get the most bang for our buck? How do we minimize costs and maximize the benefits of an engineering project? You could say it's where the blueprints meet the budget.
I mean, just think about the kind of questions an engineer has to answer every day. We have two bridge designs. Which one do we pick? Should we replace this old piece of machinery now, or try to squeeze one more year out of it? We've only got enough money for one big project this year, so which one gets the green light? Every single one of those is an economic decision. It's all about deciding how to use scarce resources, money, time, materials, to get the absolute best result.
So how do you actually make these calls without just guessing? Well, whether you're an engineer or an economist, you've got a toolkit of core concepts to help you think rationally. Let's pull out a few of the most essential tools that they use to figure all this stuff out.
First up is demand. Now, we all think we know what demand means. It's just wanting something, right? But in economics, it's a little more specific. It's not just wanting that new sports car. It's wanting it and being willing and having the actual cash to buy it. If you can't afford it, it's just a wish, not economic demand.
And on the flip side of that coin, you've got supply. This one's a bit simpler. It's just the amount of something that sellers are ready and able to put on the market at a certain price, right now.
And here's where the magic happens, when these two forces meet. Just look at the relationship in this table. Generally, when the price is low, lots of people want to buy, so demand is high. But when the price is high, suppliers are way more excited to sell, so supply goes up. It's this constant push and pull between what we're willing to pay and what they're willing to sell for.
The market is always trying to find its balance. And that point where the amount people want to buy perfectly matches the amount that companies want to sell, that's called the equilibrium price. You can think of it as the market's happy place, the sweet spot, where both buyers and sellers feel like they got a fair deal.
All right, another super important tool for making decisions is understanding efficiency. But it's not quite as simple as it sounds, because when we're looking at a choice, especially in engineering, we have to think about two different kinds of efficiency.
And this slide breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you have technical efficiency. That's all about the physical stuff, using the least amount of raw materials, the least amount of energy to get something done. But on the other side, you've got economic efficiency, and that's all about the money. It's about finding the method that is flat out the cheapest. A process might use a bit more steel, for example, but if the labor is much cheaper, it could be the more economically efficient choice. And for any real-world project, that's almost always the one that wins.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. From that universal problem of wanting everything but only having so much, to the dance of supply and demand, to the critical difference between using less stuff and spending less money, all these powerful ideas are quietly shaping every single decision you make. So the next time you have a choice, try to think like an economist. Don't just ask, what does it cost? Ask, what am I really giving up to get it?